Hey everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Coach Replay show. I've got Kim and Pete on. This special episode is a follow-up to last Friday's episode we had with Pete on self-reflection and its role in empowering our teachers. And so today we're here. We've got some folks who have submitted questions ahead of time. So we've got a few of those. But if you're watching live, I want you to hit that comment button on whatever platform you're watching and say hello. Let us know you're there. Kathy's already done so. So, hey, Kathy, welcome. Kathy had submitted a question early, so we're going to get to her question today. But so excited to have you back. Pete, welcome.
Well, thanks. It's good to be back. It's always good to be here. And I love talking coaching with coaches. I think that's just work that's empowering and just makes you feel good. So I'm glad that we're here doing this again today.
Yeah, I am too. And we've got some questions. We had a couple of questions that came in from a number of folks kind of all over the US that have kind of the same kind of theme to them. So we're going to get to that. But I think Kim's got our first question for the day, one from one of our APs. His name's Marion in Texas. Kim?
Yeah. Did you post that for me?
Yeah, let me pull it up. I'm trying to click all the buttons. I did tell her.
My friend from Marion. One moment, please.
There
we go.
There.
I got it. You ready, Pete? All right. With limited time to reflect, when do you think it's crucial to be reflective about teaching, and when is it okay to stick with what works, in quotation marks? Thank you, Marion.
Gosh, talk about a loaded question. There's a lot of different degrees of things that we'd like to unpack in that question, right? The first thing that I'd like to address is limited time to reflect. Of course, we have limited time to reflect because the allotted space that we have to do things is this much, and we've got this much stuff to do, and trying to fit reflection into that is going to be a challenge for us. So of course that's going to be a challenge. And initially, what we're talking about when we talk about building self-reflection is building self-reflective habits. We want to get in the practice of doing that and engaging in that work. So self-reflection at first is something that we do separately to build the skills to engage in that practice to get better at it. And then we incorporate it into the work. So we're reflecting while things are happening, and we're thinking about things while we're in the midst of it. So that's a piece of it. That helps alleviate kind of some of the time concerns, is being able to reflect in the midst of action. The second part of the question is, when is it okay to stick with what works, and when should we actually be reflecting? Well, what works according to whose definition of what works, and what are we talking about? That we're doing just fine, or we're surviving, a couple of the kids are thriving. What are we talking about? So that's one thing that Marion, you and anyone else that asks this question will have to wrestle with yourself, is what is the threshold for this is good enough? And do we have some say in that? And do we have some agreement in as long as we get to here, we're good. The real question that you're asking is, when do we really want to encourage self-reflection? When do we want to build that habit, really focus on that practice? And my response to that is whenever it matters to us. Whenever the outcome is something that's important to us, whether it's student learning outcomes or incorporating professional practice outcomes, or if you take it outside of education and into our real life, if it's about budgeting, if that matters to us, we should be reflective about our budgets. Or if we're thinking about how we're spending time together and what we're doing as a family, then we should be reflecting on that if that's important to us. And it all comes back to that question. So for the most part, that's going to lean towards, are our teachers setting goals? Are they focused on something? And are they really concentrating their efforts to get better at some element of their teaching? And if that's the case, then yeah, we want to make sure that we're encouraging those habits. So as coaches, we want to be prompting, we want to be encouraging reflective dialogue, we want to give folks reflective journals, we want to have the opportunity to sit down and have dialogue. Even just walking down the hallway next to them, if we know that a teacher's working on transitions, walk down the hallway next to that teacher and say, hey, I know you're working on your transitions. Tell me about one thing that worked well with you or with your transitions today. And it can be a quick conversation just to keep that in the front and center of somebody's mind. So that'd be kind of my short answer. That's the short answer. Maybe that's the long answer. That's my answer.
That's your answer. Yeah, I like that. And it's similar to, we've got another question from Richard, who's a teacher in Chula Vista, who says, we couldn't fit all of his question in on here, but he said, I'm really reflective about my practice, but sometimes I feel like my principal would prefer that I just do what's in the curriculum, not necessarily get creative. So he's wondering, as a capacity builder in a teacher role, what should I do as a teacher to make sure that reflection and iteration are encouraged on my campus? It probably feels a little bit lonely if he's the only one iterating and reflecting, and his team's kind of like, we just have to stick to the curriculum. What are you doing? Why are you working so hard? So what are your thoughts with that, Pete?
Yeah, that's a daunting challenge. For one, if you're working in an environment in which kind of that idea of continuous growth and improvement is if you're feeling stifled by that. So while I want to address that in just a second, the first part of that I want to address is what you mentioned about do what's in the curriculum, right? That and self-reflection are not mutually exclusive. You can do what's in the curriculum and engage in rigorous self-reflection to make sure that how you're teaching that curriculum and how you structure your classroom and the activities that you're providing and the questions that you're asking and the way that you do that work is at the pinnacle of your abilities, right? You can reflect on that to increase your effectiveness while still teaching the curriculum. So just because it's in the curriculum and just because you have and I'm assuming, although I don't know this, Richard maybe has a scripted set of lesson plans or a program that he's supposed to follow like that, we can still be creative, we can still be innovative, we can still be reflective and thoughtful about how we implement that to make sure that it's meeting our students' needs. And that's a big part of it is making sure that in our own head we don't separate the two and say, I'm either teaching the curriculum or I'm being reflective. The second piece of it is as a teacher or as a coach or as a member of the instructional community, you have the opportunity to discuss self-reflection and self-improvement. And you can challenge your administrator. We call this coaching up, right? You can challenge your administrator to say, hey, I want to get better. I want to get better, and I want you to help me get better. And I'm going to do whatever I can to improve my practice. So here's some things that I might need from you. I need you to challenge me with reflective questions. I want you to give me opportunities to think outside the box and push myself. I want you to give me feedback on my practice. So come in my classroom and observe how I'm doing. Ask me what I'm working on. Those kind of questions we can do as teachers to challenge our administrators and even challenge our coaches if we want that support and we're interested in growing. That piece is really, really important, that we can't just sit back and wait for someone to give us feedback. If that's not happening, we go out and ask for it, right? We can prioritize that.
Yeah, really about kind of self-advocating, right, for yourself as a learner and what you need to keep yourself kind of moving forward. So I like that. Kathy, who's watching, says, I think we need to teach kids first, curriculum second. I think there's definitely lots of thoughts around, focusing too much on our curriculum. So yeah, and reflection is where we kind of are able to marry, the best practices, the information that we have about our students, the curricular resources that we have, whether those are of great quality or we might have some missing pieces. Reflection is really where we can kind of customize that experience for our learners and grow ourselves as practitioners. So.
Yeah, I totally
and
agree.
one thing I wonder too is, sometimes as a coach, this is something that I struggle with a lot. Sometimes as a coach, I had an idea of what I thought that teachers needed. And when they're when I ask that question of like, hey, what do you think you need to work on? I'm trying to engage them in this process. We are on two different pages, and I feel like we need to go this direction. They feel like they need to go this direction, and we might not be feeling the same way. So how do you navigate that when you might have, two different things going on?
Yeah, before Pete asks that question, I just want to, or answers that question. That's exactly the question we had from a few of our viewers. So Janie down in Texas, who's a district lead teacher, said, Yeah, I got a teacher who thinks they're good. There's no need for growth, but I see them struggling with technology and management, adopting the new curriculum. Megan, who's a coach in Washington, says, I have a teacher who wants to focus on assessment, but I really think it's relationships that she should be focusing on. Like, how do I help them reflect on what I'm seeing? You know, how do I kind of align what I'm seeing with what maybe they should be seeing in the classroom? So, yeah.
Gosh, those are such great questions, and I really appreciate having those put out there, because that's what coaches all across the country are asking and wanting to know is, and it's so easy for us, right, to walk into a classroom, whether we're administrators or coaches or whatever our role might be, department chairs, mentors, whatever. We go into a classroom and we can see everything that's going on in there. We're seeing it as it's unfolding from our little balcony seat or whatever it might look like, and we see everything. We can see everything that's happening. And when you're a classroom teacher, you're in the trench. You're right there, and you've got this going on, and you're trying to navigate and manage all those different things that are happening. And what's in our minds and what we see as visitors to the classroom might be totally different, right? So there's two different ways of approaching this challenge. Number one is, if we want our coaching relationship to be productive and effective, if we want to do the best possible job we can do as coaches, then we have to remember what our charge is as coaches. Our job as coach, our charge as coach, is to support our teachers in achieving their goals and improving their practice. That means, and if you were here last week when I did the initial session, it's got the locus of control has to be with the teacher. Teachers got to start and say, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm curious about. This is what I want help on. This is the goal that I've set. Can you please help me? And if it starts there, then as coaches, we are going to help our teachers with whatever it is they've set. Now, sometimes that's going to require us to help teachers with things that we don't think is the most pressing item. And that is okay. In fact, that's good, because when the teacher owns it and says, this is what I'm working on, and you might look at the teacher and think, holy smokes, you got so much stuff going on in this classroom. How'd you come up with that one? But okay, I'll help you with that. And when we support our teacher achieving that goal and working towards that, what we're doing is we're building a sense of confidence, we're building a sense of partnership, and we're also building a habit in how we address our goals and our curiosity and the work that we want to do together. So we're building that habit in how we engage in reflection, in addition to showing as coaches that we're totally here for you. And when that goes well, the teacher will most likely say, hey, that was great. Thank you so much for helping me with that. What else should I work on? And you might ask, well, what else would you like to work on? And the teacher might say, gosh, I don't know. And maybe the teacher says, I do know, it's this. And you still might say, that's not it, but okay. And if the teacher says, I don't know what do you think? That's your opportunity. And there will come a time that the teacher will ask you, well, what do you think we should work on next? And that's when you can say, you know what, one of the things I've noticed from being in your classroom for the past 7 months is such and such is happening. And I would love to support you with some of that. Is that something that you've noticed too? Is that something that you're interested in? And that's our opportunity to engage in that work. That's path one, and that's the ideal. That's the perfect world. And when I do this work, I'm really only interested in the perfect world. And so I like to try to build that first.
Right.
The other option is if the teacher doesn't see that and you're not able to make inroads working with the teacher on whatever the teacher wants to work on it, or you have a time commit, this is just something you have to work on, right? Like you just have to, there's no getting around it. And or if an administrator has told the teacher, hey, I've got a concern with your performance, you need to improve on this, or you might not be working here next semester, then that has to come from admin that says, this is what you need to work on. And if you are interested in growing in this regard, then I suggest you as teacher take that online course. I suggest you read this material. I suggest you connect with your professional learning communities and work on it together. I suggest you reach out to your instructional coach. And we want the teacher then to reach out to the coach to say, hey, I'm struggling with something. My admin wants me to partner with you to help me get better at this. Can you help me? And it's still, the locus of control is still the teacher, even though it kind of came by way of the administrator. It is the administrator's responsibility to identify that need so that the teacher can reach out to the coach to get it. As coaches, we really aren't in a position, and we should not be in a position where we are telling our teachers what they need to work on. You need to work on this. You're struggling with this, so you need to work on this. Unless our teachers ask us, what should I be working on? What have you noticed? What feedback can you give me? Help me, I don't know what to work on. Then it's still, the locus of control is still on the teacher because the teacher's asking coaches for that feedback. So that's the, in the perfect world, locus of control has got to be with the teacher, and that's kind of best case scenario.
Yeah, and I love that you kind of addressed it from both of those perspectives. You know, I think Janie's is teacher's like, I'm good, don't need you, and she sees things. So it really can't necessarily be her, is what I heard you say, kind of going in and saying, yeah, but I think you need help with technology. Maybe that needs to be where she's partnering with her administrators. Yeah.
And you said the perfect word. You said, yeah, but. And I don't know how many of y'all out there appreciate when anybody says, yeah, but to you. You say something,
right,
and they start with, yeah, but back, and you've already shut it down. It's not going to go well.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, sometimes as instructional leaders, regardless of what our title is, it can be difficult. I also appreciated that you talked about, you know, the teacher really owning that, even if it's not always in alignment with what we are seeing in the classroom or an area where we might want to support them. I know this year I came into my coaching and working with some teachers who I worked with last year who taught all online, learned a lot of really great tools and strategies that they, you know, I was hoping would be taken into the in-person classroom and used in specific ways, but those were my ideas. So I've had to sit back and hold my tongue and just wait it out. And some of my teachers, I kind of got three bears right now that I've been working with. I've got the one teacher who like just needs she's more of the refinement stage teacher. She's reflective. She's moving forward. She'll reach out every once in a while to like throw some ideas around. And I'm like, oh, and do you need help with that? She's like, no, I got it. And I'm good. You know, she sends me a video the next week. She's done it. Another teacher who wants to talk more through those ideas and the process of what that would look like, maybe needs some help doing some of those things in class. And then another teacher who's really got the ideas, but is really struggling with implementation. So we've just gone a little bit slower. All of those are the appropriate places for where those teachers need to be, right? Based off of their reflective capacity, based off of kind of where they are in their goal setting. But it can be hard for me to slow down one area and then also go so fast in another area. And I know for a lot of coaches, that's kind of the struggle, is not wanting to take the wheel from that teacher and say, let me drive for just a minute. You know, we'll get there faster if I just do some driving for you. So I know that takes a lot of control, self-control and patience, which I don't always have as a coach. So it's a good reminder.
Well, and the hard thing is when you're in a classroom and you see that there are children in the classroom and you think, gosh, we need to make changes soon. You know, we need to make this quick because there's kids in the room. And yeah, we get that. And we also have to keep in mind the long-term goal that we're working on is generations of kids that are going to come through that classroom, that we want to build this teacher up. And yeah, you could tie that teacher's shoes right now. You could go in there and just say, hey, teacher, move over. I got this. And you could teach the lesson. But if you're not there, you're not going to be able to do that. And that's the whole idea of coaching, is supporting their growth for those moments and those decades of our absence when we're not in the room with them. And I think that's the big picture to keep in mind. And I remember, just a quick peek story, when I was a younger principal, I remember walking into teachers' classrooms thinking, okay, so there's something the teacher did that I would have done differently, and I have a better way of doing that. And I remember then having that conversation with the teacher and telling them, you know, when you did this, do this instead. And the teacher's like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And I'm pretty sure as my teachers left my office, they're like, oh, what kind of weird idea was that? Why would I do that? And even if it was a great idea, what I'm doing by telling my teachers exactly how to do it and how to do it better is I am limiting the ability of them to grow. That they can now only grow as far as what I know. And as soon as they know what I know, I got nothing left to offer them. And so there's no continued growth waiting for them. So rather than that, we want to build capacity. We want to engage in that work that really assists them in taking the ownership of the work itself. So.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I think, we talked last time about my coaching experiences as well. And I did that often. But what I hear you saying is we have to build relationships with teachers first. I don't think at the end of the day, I can't live with someone, in their classroom. And in order for them to really want to do the change, I've got to build a relationship with them. They have to trust me. And then we can work on shared goals together. And that's really going to make a bigger impact. So next question, how do we help ensure our teachers that have asset-based mindset, how do we keep them understanding the importance of building on what students can do versus what they can't do? So how do we help with that, continuing to have that asset-based mindset for teachers?
Yeah, that's the Kathy question. That's Kathy from Massachusetts. Go Red Sox, Kathy.
Yeah, Kathy, thank you for your question.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the culture. And so, at the risk of promoting my own book, here's creating a culture of reflective practice. It's all about building an environment and building a culture. And so, one of the earlier questions was about fostering that idea of continuous growth and encouraging teachers to want to get better and to strive to get better and to continue to move to get better. This is another element of that, is the whole idea of, are we looking, and if you've seen that, the video on relationships on YouTube, and I'm just totally blanking on it. Yes, Rita Pearson.
Yeah.
Yes, Rita Pearson, where she talks about the +2 versus -18, right? That's what we're talking about here is, +2 says I ain't all bad, right? -18 sucks all the life out of you. So that's part of this idea is, how do we identify what our kids know, and then what are we working towards? I mean, that's really the only information that we need is what's our goal, what are we striving towards, where are we now, and how can we close the gap? And that's professionally, that's what we want to do. I mentioned budgets before, our personal finance, that's what we want to do. Our professional goals, student learning outcomes, all of that comes back to where do we want to go, where are we now, how do we close the gap? So how do we do this? Yes, Kathy, every child needs a champion. That's the one. How do we do that? Is we continue to foster that by having that conversation. So when conversations turn to learning loss and they turn to what deficits our kids have and what our kids are not capable of doing, what we do then is we reframe that by saying, okay, and what can our kids do? What skills are they bringing to the table? What have they mastered that we can build on, that we can use? And we force that conversation to go to that place. The other thing that we do is we use that reflective cycle, which is that, that process of thinking and reflecting and allocating our mental energy towards whatever it is we're focusing on. And we wash that conversation about learning loss right down the drain, and we move it along and say, okay, yeah, great. Kids don't know this, kids are missing that. And what's our goal? What do we want to accomplish? What is it that we want our kids to be able to do? And I hear this a lot academically and a lot behaviorally right now with, oh, kids are coming to school, they're missing all these social emotional skills. They don't know how to walk in the hallways. And so then the question becomes, well, what do we want? What in the perfect world, what would be happening? And then a teacher might say, well, I want the kids to be able to walk in the hallway, quietly. So say, okay, so what kind of effort and energy have we spent towards then setting that expectation, modeling that expectation, explaining and talking to kids and having them build that common expectation together where they can express it and then practice it? What work have we done to build that, rather than just throwing up our hands and saying, well, they just don't have the skill. They just can't do it. They've forgotten how to do it. And they won't. Well, we can stay there, which won't get us anywhere. Or we can start taking steps to actually get to that place. So to Kathy, to answer your question, is we redirect the question and reframe it around the perfect world outcome. What would be happening in the perfect world? And let's start talking about the strategic steps and the plan that we can create to get to that place and to build that. And that's part of coaching up. That's part of creating a culture. That's part of just the way we do business in our settings to help build and foster that mindset. I hope that makes sense for you.
Yeah, let us know, Kathy. And one thing I can say about Kathy, because we know Kathy. Kathy is actually one of our coaches here at Sibme, and she really does focus on the bright spots. So I think that's definitely something that she can do. And I think that's affirming, right, for folks like Kathy who are trying to constantly redirect to those bright spots and redirect to the glows for teachers to really kind of focus on the assets that they do have, that strengths-based kind of mentality. And that's important, especially for this year, right? As we are looking at yet another variant coming out and more exhaustion and more worry and trauma and all the things that have come with this pandemic over since 2020. I think it's just important for us to also focus there with our feedback, with our capacity building, and how we're helping empower teachers through their own reflection, help keep the locus of control with them as we support them. So,
I totally agree with that. And Kim, you were talking about your coaching experiences last time, and you were, as I recall, a little bit hard on yourself. And
I think I used the word terrible, but yes.
Okay.
I've said worse things about my first years.
For saying that. I was like, "Oh,
well,
sorry."
that's the word that she had to use because we were in a public place and the session was being recorded.
Right.
Exactly.
The interesting thing about that is that we don't want to be defined by our deficiencies, right? We don't want to be defined by the things that we don't have and what we lack. We want to be defined by the things that we do have and the skills that we had. So Kim, you did some things that worked as a coach, and yet your mind was focused on, well, what am I not getting? What is not working? Which can help you in your own work towards self-improvement and identifying needs of focus. It doesn't do a whole lot of work to build the flywheel of success, though, right? So we need to be intentionally aware that that's happening in our own heads so that we can take the reins of our inner monologue and change what we're saying in our own heads about ourselves and the work that we do, about our kids, about our colleagues, about our administrators, about our families. And that's where we have power. We have power when we take over our inner monologue, because we all have that little inner voice inside our heads, right? And it doesn't always say nice things to us. If we just leave it be, we need to take charge of it. And that's some work that I've been doing. I've been studying a lot on this, and that's where we have an incredible amount of power, is when we take over what that inner voice is saying.
Yep. And I think, it's so much easier to remember the negative things. I think all people are like this. I think teachers, students, every human is this way. It's so much easier to see the negative versus the positive, but you can train yourself, I've learned, to start to see positive things. I think sometimes when we have teachers who are resistant or hesitant, like Kathy has said, or other folks, Janie has said today, sometimes it's because they need to see some positive things. Sometimes it's students need to see positive things. So I think that's a great reframing, because for me, I've had to do that a lot. We learn by our mistakes, right? And it's not a bad thing. But I think seeing those positive things have really helped as well. But you have to kind of train yourself for that, right? That's not easily done.
Yeah.
Habits. Talking about habits.
Yeah. Talking about habits. We had, speaking of kind of retraining in that inner monologue, one of our colleagues, Kathy Ferguson, joined us. She's from the UK, and she did an episode on the Coach Replay show just about that. So we'll have to drop that in the comments for some folks if that's something that's piquing your interest today. It's been wonderful, Pete, having you on twice in a row, which has been really great. So we're so excited about the special edition, and thanks so much for offering to do that. I know we've had several folks joining in. We've had quite a few folks on. We've got one more question. Do we have time for another? Two questions that just came through. So do we have time for another question?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go with Melody Deemer's question. Can coaching be successful in buildings or districts that don't have a culture of reflection and continuous improvement? What are your thoughts?
That's a good question. Oh, the koala. I like the koala there. Yes, coaching can be successful because we define what success is, and we define what that means if it's going well. So if we're looking at universal success where everyone has embraced coaching and everyone is seeking coaching, well, that's not going to happen if we don't embrace continuous improvement. If we're looking at I've got a teacher that I want to help, build some skills and support this teacher, and this teacher wants my help, and we can make gains one-on-one, one teacher at a time, one day at a time, one lesson at a time. Yeah, that can be success, and that can be successful. And what we're doing there, Melody, is we're starting a movement. We're starting to build that culture by having success. And I think anyone who's ever worked in a school building knows that if something doesn't go well, immediately everybody seems to know about it, right? It spreads like wildfire across campus that something didn't go well, that somebody did something that they shouldn't have done. And by the same token, when something does go well, it also spreads like wildfire. So if your work with a particular teacher goes well, and that teacher is successful, and that teacher is empowered, and that teacher's reflective capacity is built, I guarantee you that teacher will share one way or another, whether it's through modeling or through a discussion or through just doing something that gets positive results, and others will see it and others will hear about it and know about it. And then that's how the word gets out that, hey, I want a piece of that. How do you get connected with the coach to do work like this? And that's how you build that movement in such a place, right? And then we want to be really explicit about exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so as people come to us and ask, we say, oh, you want to build your capacity? All right, well, I'm here as a capacity builder to support you. Absolutely. What are you working on? What are you curious about? And we just start having those conversations openly and honestly and directly with folks to start to build that culture. Then a couple of years down the road, folks will say, how'd you do that? And then you can point back to that one teacher where it all began.
Yeah, and I would imagine that Melody is that person, that wants to have this reflection and this continuous improvement. The one thing that I will say, if that's true, is that for you might be the teacher that everyone is looking forward to seeing. That they come to school to see you, that you're that coach that people just love to have around. And if you've coached long enough, you know that there are people that you continuously have relationships with, regardless of if you're in the school or even the state. And I think that it's important to remember that. Coaching can and leadership can be lonely sometimes. I think that's something to acknowledge as well. And I think it's, as long as you're trying to build capacity of teachers so that students are learning, then you're doing a great job. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. And speaking of community, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe the Coach Replay show so you can continue to hear. Pete, I've got one more question for you, and I'm going to see if you can answer it in less than 2 sentences, and then we're going to wrap up. Okay. You ready for this? Kelly Pittman asked, and I'm just curious because I like this question. What's the missing ingredient in training the coaches of teachers?
The missing ingredient, I would say, is a misguided approach, because what we tend to do is we tend to focus on training, which helps people do what they're already doing. Well, what helps people learn something new, right? We train them on how to do something. What we then take a step towards doing is coaching, which helps them do what they're doing better. And what our approach really emphasizes is building capacity, which is helping folks to build that habit of reflective thought so that they can go all the way back to the very beginning about what am I doing, how am I doing it, and how can I do it better. And it's a misguided approach where we're not going deep enough into the approach to support teachers. We're doing surface level. I know this is more than 2 sentences, but we're doing surface level work.
My kind of speaker.
I was going to say that.
For instance, I want to help you with guided reading. I'm going to show you how to do we're going to train you in guided reading. And then as you start implementing guided reading approaches, I'm going to coach you on how to do guided reading better. And the reality is, if you really want long-term growth, we want to build your capacity so that you can reflect your way through the whole process of guided reading, and you can help surface the ways that you can improve and the questions you can ask yourself, so that you can improve the outcomes so that your kids are learning more. So
right. So no matter what curriculum comes their way, new session, new training, new idea, new initiative, they've got that capacity that's going to transcend all of that, right? That's what I love about you and Alisa's book, is all of your books around reflection, is it really does. It kind of builds that capacity, and then that spreads like a wildfire. It really does create this culture, because you've got multiple people whose capacity has been built, and now they're able to build up others. So I think that was a very interesting response to Kelly's question. And I totally agree, right? Like we focus too much on making coaching happen to people. I'm going to take them through a coaching cycle instead of actively engaging them in the process. So that's definitely something that Kim and I have seen with some of the coaches and leaders we've worked with who are like, oh, I've been thinking about coaching differently. I've heard this idea of a cycle and I thought I had to go do these things and then I've coached, or I have a conversation and I've coached, but I haven't really thought about the other side of this, which is who should be owning it, right? The teachers. So
when you're coaching, it's all about what you're doing. And if you're building capacity, it's all about what the other person is learning and growing and the habits they're developing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks so much. Melody says, thanks for the comments. Optimism is infectious and energizing. I agree. This has been a great episode.
Melody, appreciate that.
Yes. So thanks again, Pete, for joining us. I hope we'll have more collaborations in the future. And again, everyone, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. If you missed last week's episode with Pete, check that out. We'll drop it in the comments. There's a great takeaway where you can get all of the information to be able to find Pete's book that he showed off and his other publications. Follow him on social media. Definitely a guy you want to follow. So, all right. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you this Friday for another episode of the Coach Replay Show.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, all.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.